watching my life go by. 10-year-old Emmy found herself caught in the midst of daily verbal arguments between her parents, Adam and Rebecca. Adam firmly believed that Rebecca was the person he was destined to spend the rest of his life with, and couldn't fathom a world without her. However, Rebecca took the difficult decision to file for divorce, leaving Emmy to witness her departure from the family home with just an overnight bag. Days later, Adam explained to Emmy that Rebecca had moved on and didn't want to see either of them again. Adam took on the responsibility of supporting the family. He first established routines to help them adjust to this new chapter of their lives. They started meal prepping the same basic meals together, carefully packing them into black plastic containers with clear lids and plasticware. Adam was a gifted engineer, and he started a small architecture construction business. He soon realized he needed some extra help around the house. Emmy had to mature quickly, becoming the woman of the household. The police at first frequently visited, inquiring if Adam or Emmy had any information about Rebecca's whereabouts, and even searched the house a few times. A decade passed, and Rebecca's sister Samantha, who'd been a constant in their lives, developed a romantic relationship with Adam. She had helped raise Emmy and offered continuous support since Rebecca left. One morning, Adam's office called, urgently needing a photograph of a blueprint for a major client located in his home office in the basement. Emmy went down to the office and, while there, noticed faint tapping noises. Curious, Emmy started listening for the taps. She even started knocking on the walls and shelves. It sounded like it was behind the bookshelf. She started pulling books down and setting them aside. Finally, she tried to move a book that was glued to the shelf. She gave it a good yank and felt the shelf swing like a door toward her. Slowly opening it, Emmy was unexpectedly tackled by a pale creature with disheveled hair down to its legs and tattered clothing, wielding a plastic knife. The creature tried to stab Emmy in the eyes and throat. Emmy rolled over, reversing the position, and started grasping for objects on top of her father's desk. Emmy was able to grab a letter opener and stab the creature multiple times until it lay motionless. Blood started pooling along the floor. Emmy stood up and dropped the pointed opener. She stepped over the creature and opened the door further to discover a padded room filled with black meal prep containers, a small bed, a toilet, and a television behind a sheet of clear plexiglass. There was a live stream of hidden cameras all around the house. A sticky note behind the glass wrote, "If you don't want to live with us, you can watch us live." Emmy exited the room to see the thing that attacked her. Emmy slowly began to recognize it and started crying profusely. "Mom." My father wakes up with bruises every day. My father wakes up with bruises every day. My poor 80-year-old father has dementia, which means that he can't remember a lot of stuff that happens to him. It's heartbreaking, really, how the strongest man I knew could turn into something so fragile. But lately, weird things have been happening. My father keeps waking up with bruises, cuts, scratches, burns, and other injuries. He has no idea how they got there. It breaks my heart to see him in such poor condition. I'm his sole caretaker after Mom died in a tragic incident 10 years ago. We live alone other than my cat, Scampy. The bruises got worse the other day. There was a cut so deep I swore I saw bone. I always bandage them up, but he tells me he doesn't need to see a doctor, he'll be fine. This morning, I woke up to see his face with a black eye, a broken lip, and jagged cuts on his body. He had no idea how this had happened, and I promised I'd find out what could have been hurting him. I knew it wasn't accidents. Nobody could make injuries that bad from simple falls, or little trips down the stairs. It had to be someone, so I set up cameras. I let him watch them, and we saw nothing. It was just blank, him doing his daily motions he did every single day. The bruises and cuts got worse, as well as his memory. He could barely remember my mother was dead sometimes. My father has dementia, which means he doesn't remember anything, which means he doesn't remember breaking my wrist when I was 5 or smacking me around when I was younger. It means he doesn't remember beating me half to death almost every day. It means he doesn't remember getting so drunk he murdered my mother and buried her in the garden, then reporting her missing. My father had dementia, which meant he didn't remember how I cut a line into his arm for every time he hit me, how I slammed him into things, how I pushed him down, how I made every day miserable for that sick bastard. My father woke up with bruises every day, and he deserved it. Hey, The text was from an unknown number. It was a harmless enough message, so I simply blocked the number and went on with my day, quickly forgetting about it. Hey. This time it was an email. The sender's address was a long string of random letters and numbers. I paused, remembering the text I received the week prior and wondering how this email got through the filters. I reported it, blocked the email address, and once again pushed it from my mind. Hey. A few days later I got another message. I stared at the Facebook notification. The profile was essentially blank, the name once again just random letters and numbers. I felt sweat start to prickle on my brow. The messages before were easily written off as spam, just the result of some seedy website selling my information. This message, however, felt more personal. I reported the account and blocked it for good measure, but had a much harder time forgetting about it. Hey. Only a day later, an Instagram message from a blank account. Now I truly felt targeted. I reported and blocked the account and spent the next few hours trying to figure out who could be sending the messages and why they were sending them to me. Hey. A few hours later, I received the next message through Reddit. With Facebook and Instagram both linked to my name, I could see someone tracking me across both platforms. But this was something else. I had no idea how they could have found my profile, let alone identified it as me. Hey. Discord. And I was now sure I was being stalked. But what could I do? Report it to the police? No crime had actually been committed, just a series of innocuous, albeit creepy messages. I started seeing it everywhere, in my real life, all throughout my day. I could no longer just report and block out the dreaded messages. Hey. I saw a billboard on my way to work boldly declaring that one word. Hey. Next was a flyer on a telephone pole with those 3 letters. Hey. A note slipped in my mailbox. They know where I live? Hey. Sidewalk chalk along my driveway? Hey. Spray paint on the side of my house? Hey. Scrawled across my bathroom mirror. I knew the next time would be worse. Hey. I woke up in the middle of the night to the feeling of something in my mouth. Rolling over, I gagged and tore it out with my fingers. It was a slip of paper, neatly rolled up despite my saliva and grabbing. What do you want? I screamed desperately into the darkness. Hey, the darkness whispered back. My wife smells, and I don't think I have the heart to tell her. Our favorite comedian paraded around the stage on our flat-screen TV. His hands were thrown in the air enthusiastically as he delivered the punchline. The crowd roared and went wild, cackling like hyenas. I also should have been laughing, but I wasn't. It was the smell. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was unpleasant enough to gently churn my stomach in a way that completely took away from the show. It was a sour, sweet sort of smell, like something decaying beneath layers of perfume and Chanel. Perhaps a dead fawn that was slowly being overtaken by lilacs, the decomposition slowly feeding the beautiful flowers. A transition from something that was unpleasant, but would soon be something wonderful. By the smile on her face, I could tell she hadn't noticed it. The light from the TV danced across her blue eyes like stars shimmering over an ocean. It made my heart ache in my chest how much I loved her, despite the smell. How could I possibly tell her? Tell the woman I cherished and adored that she stunk? I wouldn't. I couldn't. I wrapped my arm around her shoulders and pulled her closer, forcing myself to ignore the scent that filled my nostrils. I kissed her cheek and made a mental note to double down on the embalming fluid tomorrow. But for tonight, it was just the 2 of us, and there was nowhere I'd rather be in the entire world. What they don't tell you about dying is, there's one thing they don't tell you when you die. When you come back, you know how everyone else is going to perish. What they don't tell you when you come back from that void is that in that split second when your heart starts pumping again, you remember, but just for that split second. What they don't tell you is, if you die a second time, that fleeting echo remains. The first time I had a heart attack, I woke up a little grayer than before. The second time was a car accident. When I woke up on the hospital bed, it all came screaming back. The doctors didn't believe me when I told them the man next to me visiting his wife was about to die. Not until the AC unit above his head fell off the wall and popped his head open like a ripe watermelon. They still didn't believe me, and I guess who would? I'm not clairvoyant, not by any stretch, but I still knew I was right. From that moment, I made it my life's work to save as many as I could. The child crossing the road, a scrape on his face rather than mangled in the engine block. I woke up 4 days later in the same hospital, only this time the bruises never faded. My skin was kissed with death. The lady eating a walnut salad should have turned blue clutching her throat, but instead chastised me angrily for spilling her lunch while my throat clammed up. That time when I came to, my face had deepened, eyes hollower, cheeks merely skin-covered bones. To say I was a walking dead would hit the mark. Everywhere I turned, I saw their deaths. The man on the hammer drill losing control, the drill upending and ramming into his chest cavity. My chest cracking, ribs splitting. The young mum swinging the buggy out of the way of the drunk driver. My bones shattering to take the impact. Every one of them I saved. I saved by giving a little of myself. What they don't tell you about dying is that every time you do, a little part of you stays dead. This morning, the smell of death wafted through my window. The spectral before me laid down his scythe and pulled out a worn book from the folds of his robe. "You," he thundered. I couldn't contain my delight. I had died so many times, and now he was here to collect me. But before I could say another word, he handed me the heavy book. I looked down as the pages opened. A name burnt into my mind. When I looked up, Death thrust his scythe into my hand. "You have died too many times. This burden is now yours." Before I could say another word, he crumbled into a pile of ash. What they don't tell you about dying is, if you do die, make sure you stay dead. A predictable ending. "Yeah, these movies never scare me, Laura," he states proudly as his arm tightens around me, just tight enough that I can feel the intentions behind it. He taps the side of his head with the index finger on his free hand and winks at me. I always see the ending coming. I smile tightly and nod at him as the scene unfolds on screen. If his observational skills were that strong, he would have noticed how I was just a bit too eager to accept his offer of a date. Well, if being forced to leave your home at knife point with a man that had been stalking you for weeks can be considered a date, he chose a drive-in, perhaps for the illusion of romanticism and normalcy. The car we're in is tucked away deep into the brush, perhaps for the reality of seclusion and no witnesses. It reeks of stale fear, but not his own. The smell has been taken up by the fabric upholstery, some of which has been clawed at desperately by those sat here before me. The maroon spatters crisscrossing the fabric of back seat betray what else he uses this vehicle for. I trace those along the side door sadly with the hand he hasn't yet realized is free. The interior of his car is only briefly illuminated by quick flashes of light from the movie as the main character runs from something unseen. I guess that's why he hasn't noticed the difference yet. And there are differences. As the movie continues, I slowly let the illusion drop away, one feature at a time, until nothing remotely resembling Laura remains. I wait for him to notice, but his eyes are glued to the screen, enjoying it. Even fake gore seems to enthrall him. "I knew it," he snorts, as a predictable ending fades into credits. Did he know it, though? Did he know that the real Laura was hiding at her mom's house in Muskogee, waiting until it was safe for her to return? Did he know that the only ones who would even notice he was missing would be the women in town that would finally be able to sleep at night? The strength behind the vice-like grip of his arm shifts from uncomfortable to borderline deadly. I stare at him patiently as he turns to me. It's all so fast, how his face loses the eager, predatory smile. Soon his mouth hangs open. He's speechless for a moment. He recoils. He sees it now. "What are you?" he asks. His voice cracks, heavy with something I wonder if he's ever felt before. Fear. It's my turn to smile, one much wider and with far more teeth, as he begins to struggle and turn. I relish the moment when he realizes that my grip is much stronger than his. I'm glad he chose such a secluded spot. It makes what comes next easier for me. I wonder if he saw this ending coming. My husband is obsessed with the crack in our living room wall. Our son Maddie was playing Fortnite when the earthquake happened. We just bought my husband's dream TV, 75 inches. As our house shook and the walls buckled, the TV toppled over, hitting Maddie in the head. My son was the reason I got out of bed for 6 years. Now he's gone. I really needed my husband, Lewis. I wanted him to go with me to grief counseling, but I can't get him to leave the house. He won't stop staring at the crack in the wall. Right behind where the TV would have been when the walls buckled, a crack formed in the drywall, just thick enough that you can almost look into it. He'll spend hours just running his finger up and down the crack, pressing his ear against it, listening. My counselor said people grieve in different ways, that I should respect his boundaries, but I was starting to get worried. I decided to confront him about the crack. Louis. He didn't even look at me. Don't you think we should get someone in to fix the wall? Shh. He shushed me. Come here, listen. He gestured for me to come listen to the crack in the wall. I humored him and pressed my ear up close. I don't hear anything. Can't you hear him? Hear who? Maddie, he's in the wall. Don't say that. He is. Just listen and you'll hear him. He's lonely in there. Maddie's gone. Our son isn't inside the wall. He shrugged me off and went back to whispering to the wall. I know I should have done more to bring him back to reality, but it was so hard to hear about our son like that. I had to leave the room and fight a crying spell in the kitchen. That night, Louis didn't even come to bed. When I went downstairs to check on him, he had a flashlight and was trying to see in the crack. He said to the wall, I don't think I'm going to be able to break you out of there, buddy. I'm going to have to find a way to get in there with you. Louis, come to bed. It was like he didn't even hear me. When I woke up, it was just me in bed. I decided I would get him away from that crack, even if I had to drag him away. When I came down the stairs, I saw him hanging from the banister. He'd tied the TV's power cord around his neck and hung himself. I couldn't breathe. My heart felt like it was going to explode. That's when I heard it, faint and distant. Mom, Mom! It was coming from the crack. I got close and pressed my ear right to the crack. Mom, I miss you, Mom. Won't you join Dad and me in here?